the pandemic has just make it like a compulsory, not a nice to have, but a must have to be actually having this kind of fidget or new ways to be thinking in terms of how can we engage even remotely or through new devices for younger habits or for younger consumer fans habits.
You're listening to Sports Tech Feed, the global sports technology podcast.
Hello and welcome to Sports Tech Feed. I'm your host, Thomas Loams. Great to have you join us again this week. On today's show, we have Jean-Baptiste Alliot, UEFA Innovation Hub Advisor and Chief Strategy Officer for LaSource. Jean-Baptiste, or JB as some of our non-French-speaking friends will know him, has worked in the sports industry for the past 10 years across multiple positions, which led him to drive the innovation strategy within UEFA and set up the UEFA Innovation Hub. Among his new responsibilities as Chief Strategy Officer at LaSource, he is now in charge of supporting sports organisations in leveraging innovation, strategic collaborations and partnerships with startups. This is a really interesting chat about a kind of holistic view to innovation within sports organisations. And we actually don't really talk about tech for kind of part of the conversation because I think it's really around that strategy piece and putting it in each layer. JB's got a great concept of innovation debt for organisations, and I'll include a link. We talk about it a little bit here, but also include a link in the show notes if you want to go read up on some of the stuff that they're looking at. And the whole idea is basically that every day that you're not pushing forwards and not looking forwards with innovation and changing, it's actually a debt you're accruing. So it's not that you're standing still, you're actually going backwards. So really interesting stuff there. If you'd like to learn more about what they're doing with UEFA and the Innovation Hub, then I'll also include some links there. And if you want to learn more about Sports Tech World Series and staying up to date with news in the sports technology community, then sportstechworldseries.com/newsletter. You can subscribe there. It's a weekly newsletter, very digestible. We're not going to be spamming you. It's a great way to get a few touch points there. And as always, I'm your host, Thomas Loams. If you'd like to reach out to me on LinkedIn, you can certainly do so. Always great to hear from our listeners and what they're up to, and can you continue the conversation in the digital realm. Thanks again for tuning in. You're listening to Sports Tech Feed, the global sports technology podcast. Jean-Baptiste Alliot, UEFA Innovation Hub Advisor. Welcome to Sports Tech Feed. Great to have you on the show.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
So, start at the very beginning. Good place to start. Tell us about the UEFA Innovation Hub. What's its mission? What's its goals? How did it come to be? And what's your role in making it all happen?
Yeah, so I will try to make it short for everybody because I think we have 30 minutes and I could be very long talking about the whole journey. But it all started back in 2016, 2017 when we had a new president coming in and a new strategy that needed to be defined for the overall organization. So we started on the strategy process and we come up with the 2019-2024 UEFA strategy. And as part of the strategy within the Intelligence Center, you could see that there was data strategy, and then another pillar that we put into it was innovation. So that was the beginning of the UEFA Innovation Hub journey. Officially, I think the Innovation Hub was launched in 2018, but it started way before. Because the thing is that you need to understand what you're trying to achieve from an organization standpoint. What's your strategy to actually use innovation to go to this direction and to answer these strategic objectives. So if you want, in short, the UEFA Innovation Hub is some kind of a vehicle to help the organization achieve its strategic objectives. And so we do have a vision of innovation, which is not necessarily only purely related to tech or to digital or to startups, but which is more on how you future-proof yourself. So how you catch future trends, how you think a bit of ahead. And the thing around innovation is that, like I said, it's not purely digital. So it's also how you make sure your organization, from the people within it, are agile and flexible enough as people, but also as an organization with its own processes to be resilient and to be able to adapt to any kind of situation, which is actually quite good when you think of a pandemic or whatever can happen in the future. So I would say it's a 360 view where we're not serving only one department, one division, or one business unit. It's across the entire organization, and we have different pillars or different strategic objectives for the UEFA Innovation Hub to make sure we do fulfill the strategic objectives of UEFA. That's in a nutshell.
Yep. And so what are some of the activities? Like, how does that look like in practice? Because obviously we're talking about innovation, and for me, my very basic definition is finding a better way of doing something. And that doesn't always involve technology, as you said, but a lot of the time it does, or tech has a role underpinning it. But how does that look like in practice?
Yeah, so what I love to say usually is like innovation is a team sport first, and second is that 99% of innovation is about processes. So you can have the best idea or you can have the best product or tech. It doesn't mean you will necessarily innovate, because you're not necessarily driving value or answering a need or having a tangible output out of it. So in concrete terms, one of our first pillars is internal. So we have the intent or the aim to foster a culture of innovation within UEFA. So what we've done is we've launched intrapreneurs. So it's teams of different people from UEFA, different colleagues sitting across different divisions and business units that come together to address a common needs. So it's to break down the silos and to make sure also we give them the tools and the methodologies to think a bit differently. It can be on the operation side. It can also be very differently onto how do we have a more diverse workforce. So for instance, one of the intrapreneur projects with different people sitting in legal, in HR, and across other functions within UEFA was about how can we minimize unconscious bias in the recruitment and promotion process. So just to make sure we don't have white, 50 years old color everywhere at the organization, but trying to have a more diverse workforce. So that's a typical example of what is potentially to be an innovation or how we consider it to be an innovation project internally, where actually that was coming also from the staff. And the idea was that in 3 months' time, we were helping them in terms of, like if it was a startup or like if it was a small company, in terms of putting together their value proposition and putting their proposal to the top management in terms of, okay, we believe a diverse workforce will be a benefit to UEFA. We believe we should reduce unconscious bias in promotion and recruitment processes. And this is how we're going to do it. And so during 3 months, it was like, okay, what's the value proposition? What is the customer segment? Can you question some of the assumptions that you have? Can we go into the different details? And so actually what we're doing with all these kind of internal activities, and I'm just highlighting this one just to give an example, but what we're doing at the end of the day is like, whether the entrepreneur route or journey is successful or not, I would say it's none of my business, but I'm happy when it's successful and that we can go forward and that it's approved by top management and that we have things moving on. But at the end of the day, whether it's successful or not, the idea is that maybe 4 or 5 people from within this team have been used to think a bit differently, have engaged also with other people from the organizations, and most importantly, they have done what we call different beacons. So it's different 1-hour activity during one day in the innovation lab, so that afterwards, when they have a new project or when they have a new challenge or something coming up, maybe they will go and they will say, okay, I did this kind of beacon in terms of prototyping, or like I was saying, what is a value map or what is a customer segment. And so when they would have a problem in the future, being an accountant, being a legal specialist, being again HR or a digital guy, okay, we can go in the lab and we can book it for 1 hour and we can go and use the same methodology to address different needs. And so the thing is, that's really a kind of a long-term vision where, okay, you have maybe 2-3 cohorts of 20 to 30 people, and the more you go, the more you have people and the more you engage with them, and the more, I would say, your organization is putting in place or having different ways of thinking or working actually. And so this comes back to your question in terms of it's not only an idea, or it can be also about only the processes and doing things better. So that's a bit.
And so does that mean when you do try and introduce tech, to bring it back to tech, we've got Sports Tech Feed in the title, we got to talk about tech at some point. Does it help, I guess, with adoption and openness to new technology and to working with startups? Because obviously UEFA has a very large very large organization, very, I don't want to say conservative because that has like kind of ideas attached to it that I don't mean.
It's a traditional.
Traditional, yeah, that's traditional is a better word for it. Yeah, traditional, and obviously the nimble startups, the kind of break stuff, move fast kind of mentality that you associate with it, isn't associated with something traditional, and generally nor should it be, because that's the way it works. It needs to be this big stable beast to get what it needs to get done, but then it still needs to, as you said,
definitely that helps. Meaning, like to do like the Innovation Hub is some kind of an interface between the inside and the outside worlds, and clearly having these kind of, usually when you talk to startups or entrepreneur or even SMEs, small and medium companies, like they are living in a different world. It's a 24/7, it's a survival thing. We live on a different time zone, or that's completely different. But clearly the fact that most of the business units or my colleagues being senior or middle managers that are getting used also to pitch or to different exercises, or that get into this kind of innovation world, clearly that helps in terms of understanding in the future. But what you were mentioning with tech is actually, and I'm happy you brought it, because we did not really much prepare for it. We can say to the people, it's pretty much on the go, but it's actually our second, I would say, strategic pillar, which is more not cultivate, but connect. So how do we leverage the UEFA's ecosystem? And here, it's not the inside innovation, it's more the outside in. And so it's how do we leverage technology or startup products which are sitting outside that can actually help us answer some of our needs, because we do have, and as most of the traditional sports organizations, we are not innovators. We don't have engineers, just like in other industries, car manufacturer, or even like plane industry or whatever, where you have engineers and sort of workforce that do have this capital or this knowledge around innovation, but we are not also the GAFAs of this world. I mean, we're not born in the 21st century, we're not born on the data. So at the end of the day, we are not necessarily equipped, or in terms of level of maturity for innovations, we are very much, I would say, at the beginning of the journey. And here we have to be realistic and honest. So the way we see it, or the way we've done it at the UEFA Innovation Hub, is like, we want to drive value. Otherwise, it doesn't work. I mean, we need to make sure it helps us answering, like I was saying, strategic objectives or different KPIs that we have and that we've settled. And so here, the idea with startups is how a product which is existing with an existing business model can help us in reaching out our goals. So it's very much incremental innovation. Luckily, or hopefully in the future, we'll be able to think a bit more ahead, even more, and even look at, I would say, pre-seeds or even more early stage startups that we can actually start working with them to even help them in terms of like tweaking or co-building different products. We are not at this stage yet. The idea here is more, we have a need, we have this ecosystem internally, we have this infrastructure. We need something that can be either plugged in or built up for us, fitting within this ecosystem to drive these KPIs or to drive this value. And this is how we tend to operate. And that's how we work with startups. So we've been working, sorry, go ahead.
Jump in, what are some of the startups that you've worked with? Because obviously there's different initiatives. You've had the Startup Challenge, you've had some of the open innovation stuff, the Reimagined football initiative that was in partnership with, was it Citigroup, KPMG? There was a lot of partners in that, Johan Cruyff Arena in Amsterdam. So what are some like actual companies that some of our listeners might know of or might not know of that you've partnered with, and what do those projects look like?
Yeah, so as part of the UEFA Startup Challenge, I think it was back in 2019, so already 2 years ago, that was an easy way as well to start and to launch the Innovation Hub. We had, just like in every other industry, we had a simple startup challenge. We onboarded 7 startups. We had 6 different partnerships. I can name, if you want, WSC. I think Daniel Marion was on the podcast and mentioned it. So automated highlight clips. I mean, they are already working with different sports organizations. So that was also something where we had a need. And actually, we are now working more and more with them, as much as we're getting them even more into our own ecosystem. So we've driven value, and now it's like how we find other use cases among the organization to scale actually their tech. That's one I can name. There's another one, which is another one, MyKick, so Formalitics, for which we've been partnering with. I know very well Andrew, Nick as well. On this one, we're working on hopefully a UEFA player card. So we are still in discussion in terms of where we bring the product to where it was 2 years ago, to try to help them all along the journey with the dev worked on their side, but also the needs. And so now we're also discussing for 2021 and how we can activate even better. Another one is Second Spectrum. So there was a tender for that, but we started to cooperate to test a bit their tech. So they are very much mature. I don't think you can name them as a startup. But
I don't think if they're a startup, every other startup in the world is stuck.
Exactly.
And, you know, their Second Spectrum is well beyond the realm.
But for the story, we knew Second Spectrum back in 2015 when they were not even US, but more Swiss. And they've been acquired by the US afterwards. So that's why also we were interested in the tech itself for other purposes, but that's one for women's football. And on women's football, we have also different strategic objectives for which they can be good in terms of new podcast feeds and new ways to engage. Yep. Another one was Livelike, I can mention, developed something on UEFA TV. Now I know it's my role as well at LaSource that Livelike has done different partnership, being in the US or even in Europe with Canal Plus, which will be the official podcast partner for UEFA for 21-24 UEFA Champions League cycle. So here it's, second screen widgets, so fan engagement functionality to get more interactivity and personalization, but also allowing sports organizations like UEFA to better understand the fans and get better data. So that's the kind of things we've been doing. We've been on open innovation. We've been testing other on the sports performance side, so more player data related, Tracker 160. We tried also in the Startup Challenge Signality. We tested VO. We've worked with Slate and Greenfly. I can name these two as well. I mean, Greenfly in terms of content creation and distribution, and even now what they are doing with the Bundesliga in terms of content creator for the podcast partner. That's something. Slate is an add-on to that in terms of how you remain on brand while distributing on socials. Yep. And Reimagined football, you touched it. I mean, the thing is, in 2020 when COVID-19 hits and the pandemic with it, like we find ourselves finding with the same challenges everywhere, all across the industry. And so we initiated the Football Innovation Cluster back in 2019 with Ken VB, with Johan Cruyff Arena, with FC Barcelona, with Man City, with the French Football Federation. And actually, even the DFL and Offenheim was part of the Reimagined football on the back of it. Less on the front, but we were all together trying to find solutions to our common needs, and on that we are still working on with different startups, and that's what we've put together. But you have a variety of technologies. I would say that the main vertical, not to be like we are like everybody. I mean, it's mainly fan engagement towards the fans today. How you drive value and new business development there, and how you define new assets, but also sports performance, but related to health, fitness, but also the grassroots level of things, like how do you engage with younger generation, and how you push or how you encourage younger generation to actually do sports and practice sports. Yeah. So that's where we're at.
And that was something for the Reimagined Football Initiative that, I mean, I'll share a link to it in the show description so people can dive into it. Basically, it was, as I said, all these different organisations. So obviously UEFA Innovation Hub, Dutch Football League, Johan Cruyff Arena.
Johan Cruyff, yeah.
Man City. Man City, the City Group coming together. So it was all these different organisations within sports, realising they had so many common problems. And that's something that it's something like the size and the scope of UEFA versus a league or even an individual team is they're all facing similar problems. Like in terms of, all right, how do we engage with our fan? How do we, as you said, future-proof yourself? How do you deal with
different generations of fandom coming through. How do you deal with, on a broadcast side, cord cutting, things like that? People want different content and they want it on demand. They want to be able to engage with it, all that kind of stuff. And then in terms of the performance side, again, same issues. Like, how do we get the best out of our athletes? And then how do we flow that down into grassroots to identify talent, to engage younger generations in being active, continue to play the game, all that kind of stuff. So this is probably more of a comment, but it's good to see that is realizing a common problem across different areas, because I think something that I hope comes out of COVID-19 and out of 2020 is the concept of a rising tide lifts all boats. So it's not kind of sports leagues, sports properties going, well, we're going to do it and we're going to protect our turf here and everyone else is a competitor. It just, everyone needs to get better. Otherwise,
I think you're right. We all have our agendas, and the thing is, clearly we're more close to a national league like the Bundesliga or the La Liga or Premier League in terms of needs and common challenges. But at the end of the day, it's also, we need to understand the game. We need to realize where the game is going, and you need to listen to stadium owners, to clubs. You need to understand the athlete performance, the player data challenges and issues coming out of it. As a regulator of the game, we need to be in a position to understand, to be ahead of what's going on, to make sure we can actually later take regulatory measures, or even like propose regulatory measures to the right governing body. So at the end of the day, I think what you were referring to, and that's what the pandemic, I hope, will have, is that you need to think football, but not only, I think sport as an ecosystem, and I would say even more large to a sport and entertainment. And so you have different verticals, and so you have different business areas for which you need actually to see the clubs, the leagues, the different stakeholders as, not as competitors actually, but more as complementary. And so we need stadium owners to be working with them to test, like Johan Cruyff Arena, or we need the clubs to be working with the athletes or our national associations, our member associations like KNVB, the Dutch Federation, to be working with them to understand better maybe injury prevention or grassroots football in terms of engagement for the younger generation. So all that to say that we cannot do it on our own. And I always, like I've said at the beginning, innovation is a team sport, and true innovation happens when you have an alignment between these different people and strategic collaborations coming in together. So pandemic has forced us to actually have the same agenda and to be really on the same table. I hope that out of it, you will see, I mean, we've seen it. The thing is, the pandemic has not changed much. I would say it has just accelerated. It's a catalyst in terms of acceleration, in terms of innovation for what was needed. And for instance, remote production, that was something coming in. The phygital and all the digitalization, that was already something that we saw. In 2019, when we were working with LiveLike or even Formalytics, MyKicks, we were, that was a nice to have maybe, but we were already seeing that was where we were heading. The pandemic has just make it like a compulsory, not a nice to have, but a must have to be actually having this kind of phygital or new ways to be thinking in terms of how can we engage even remotely or through new devices for younger habits or for younger consumer fans habits. So that what I think the pandemic has pushed us to do, but we've been always thinking very much, and the Innovation Hub has been created also like this. We need to think as an ecosystem and where we can drive value with the different protagonists, because at the end of the day, that's what we want to do. And that's how we will preserve as well the sports and entertainment industry we're in, actually.
Yeah. I mean, well said. And that's something we publish a guide called the Sports Tech Annual, which is a kind of listing of all the sports tech vendors and providers around the world, and our stadiums and venues chapter, which is free to download if anyone's interested in it. Talk to Sander van Stuyfhout. I'm sure I've just butchered his name. I'm sorry, my Dutch is terrible. But he's head of innovation for Johan Cruyff. Sander, yeah, sorry about that, mate. And he was talking about that acceleration, that point of, well, things like cashless, frictionless as a stadium experience, like things like cashless, things like advanced security measures, things like
mobility,
digital ticketing, all that kind of stuff. Was on the trend, and then the pandemic just went whoosh, and now
that was there. I mean, we were talking to Visa or even other sponsors and partners for which we see ourselves as partners to help them also push their innovation, because this is also something which is better for the fans at the end of the day. And that's clearly, as I say, a catalyst or some kind of an acceleration of existing trends, but where we were directly diving into. So he's completely right on that.
Yeah, and hopefully it's something that teams and especially the properties, and I mean that in terms of physical properties, stadiums, things like that, kind of rip the Band-Aid off on it, if you know what I mean, rather than going, oh, we're going to go cashless over the next 5 years, or I don't know, whatever the timeline is. They just go, we're going to do it now. And they just do it. And because there's other things around that you can still have machines that you can pump cash into and you'll get like a prepaid card or whatever, because there are considerations around that. But at the end of the day, just seeing where you need to go and just getting it done rather than, I guess, dragging your feet. And that's something that... I mean,
you play defensive at first because you don't know what's going on and you need to adapt and you need to understand, okay, what, because in full transparency for the first 2-3 weeks, everybody was trying to understand, okay, what's the new plan? What is the return to play? What is needed from us from a health and safety measure standpoint? So you play defensive, but then after you can be a bit more, it's not aggressive, but you go out and you say, okay, let's try to see what we can do out of it. And actually at the end of the day, it's also, you need to redefine assets, because when you have no live sports, what do you bring to your broadcast partners? What do you bring to your sponsors when you cannot activate on site? So you have all these possibilities, and we've seen it in Fortnite or in other industries where you can have live music concert or other ways to be entertained. And why not using what's already existing in other business sectors to actually drive value for our sponsors and our partners? So that's clearly some things we have in mind. And coming back to the Innovation Hub, it's really something, I think, the last pillar we have is more thinking strategically. So again, like you have cultivate and connect, which is inside and the outside, but we'll also curate, which is a bit more in terms of catching future trends. And for me, the most important thing is football or soccer for the Americans listening to us is not number one by chance. It has not been number one sport by chance for 50 years. You need to invest in it. You need to make sure younger generations get engaged as well with it. And so you need to have this kind of redistribution out of it. And you need to think, as I was saying, as an ecosystem where it preserves everybody from the top, from the clubs, from the leagues, from the federations, to make sure to grassroots, everybody has a chance to be engaged and to play with the sports, because at the end of the day, this is what will sustain it. And today, since the last decade, we've seen other forms of entertainment coming in. And at the end of the day, you fight for the attention of the new generation, of the fans of today and the fans of tomorrow. And here, football, as any other sports, need to find its place. And I think what the pandemic has allowed us is to see outside of sports, but also to help us also redefine new assets and new ways to engage or to make sure we remain number one. But that's really much like long-term thinking.
So, totally agree. And on that, I mean, the curate, the future trends, what's very briefly, what is your kind of number one that's kicking around in your brain about where the industry is going? Like crystal ball it, what's in the pipeline, do you think?
Yeah, that's this one I've always, that's the toughest, and that's what I find. The thing is, again, to drive value, because it's good to speak 10 years, but I always like to say, okay, this is what we've done. This is where we've driven value internally, like WSC, okay, this is our KPIs, Winfly, this is our KPIs, this is where we drive value. I think in terms of trends, you can look at different sectors. So take it from the fan engagement, then you have the health, fitness, and so the wellness. I think the next decade will be all about the wellness and the personalization every fan, or you can be your own athletes, even though you are a grassroots player. You kind of where Formalytics and MyKicks is sitting in terms of train like a pro or compare yourself like a pro, and you have your own player card. So that's something which is related as well to the fitness boom that we're seeing with Zwift, Peloton, but we can put it for football as well. And the next one is more the esports and the gaming side, which is linked for me with the fan engagement in terms of phygital. So again, how do you create a new experience in terms of like people wants to be together, you want to practice it, you want to be with your mates, you want to do sports, to watch sports together, to go at the stadium, but at the same time, you want something also different. You want a second screen, you want something personalized, you want interactivity, you want, I don't know if it's augmented reality or it can be an immersive experience, but this is where we will blur the lines as well in between what sports as a standalone product is with a live entertainment, lifestyle, maybe cultural thing. And I think this is where we're going. But if you want a crystal ball, I think it will also very much depend on the technology and on the product. So hardware, what I'm thinking of is definitely data. But here I'm thinking like data science, but machine learning in terms of and AI in terms of getting better and better. But I'm also thinking network-wise, 5G or better ways to actually have more data at the same time, and to actually be able to put these kind of technologies together and have a frictionless or seamless experience, because today that's not necessarily the case, or we're still fighting with some latency. But clearly the data AI thing, along with the capabilities around it, so the network, the 5G, that's something where we'll be heading to be more personalized, more interactive. And I think at the end of the day, for the new generation, with all of this is about purpose and making sure, just like the wellness is like, how do you have an impact, or how sports can tell you something else or have a new thesis for this world and for the new generation. Like, how do you embed sport into this kind of new mantra or this new purpose, impactful life, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. I think the physical, digital, the kind of fusing between the two, and the blurring of lines. I think that's really
for the best and the worst. Huh? I mean, you look at how invasive it can be, or how good it can be in terms of providing you with new services. And I mean, it's for the best and the worst, but hopefully we'll manage to make it to engage better, or to make sure actually we are true to our values. I think that's also one point I want to make clear here is, when you think of the UEFA player card and the work we're doing with Formalytics, at the end of the day, as UEFA, what we want to do is to make sure we have more kids, being boys or girls, that play football.
Yeah.
And if this means that digital is part of the solution, because you give them a tool through your iPad or your iPhone to practice better, or to compare yourself with a pro player or with your mates, or to upload your card in a game, but that incentivize you to go back on the pitch, to improve the card, because you need to improve your game to be able to have a better card, to play better against your mates. That's something where I would be more than happy to have that product being outside, to make sure that more kids are incentivized to move more, to play more, because at the end it's health benefits, it's social benefits, it's community. So it's something where we need to make sure we drive this innovation also for our strategic objective, which is increasing participations, having more boys and girls playing football.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point to bring us full circle to, as you said, it's around strategic objectives, and it's not always just tech for the sake of tech. Well, it's never tech for the sake of tech, but it's actually how do you achieve strategic objectives, and then how do you get a better way of doing that. So, well, thank you so much for your time, Jean-Baptiste. It was great to chat. Final question for you: what is your favorite sporting moment of all time?
Well, I'm a huge tennis fan. I think it would be like a Federer, Wimbledon. Can't remember the day, can't remember the year, but one of those finals against Nadal, I think, in Wimbledon. That would be one of the best moments for me.
There you go. The Swiss connection as well.
Yeah, I'm French, but actually maybe I'm becoming more and more Swiss.
Yeah. It's sinking in. Yeah. Well, okay. I'll try and get some footage of one of the many, Federer wins.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very classical on this one. It's like nothing. Like I could have gone for something a bit different, but yeah, let's say
I didn't go for the France World Cup, so I think you are definitely a bit more Swiss than French. But even considering how recent that was, so that's great. Well, thank you, Jean-Baptiste. Really appreciate your time, and looking forward to what the UEFA Innovation Hub has in store for 2021 and beyond.
Cool. Likewise, thank you, and be in touch with the sports tech world.
There you have it. That was Jean-Baptiste Alliot, UEFA Innovation Hub Advisor, Chief Strategy Officer for LaSource, and very switched on gentleman. So interesting chats there. That's kind of, I think, that, as I said, that holistic view in the intro to how to think innovation and what that means at each level. And it's not always, and actually most of the time, it's not, the shiny new piece of technology, the shiny new doodad that's going to solve everything. It's actually changes the way people think at all layers of the organization, which means that when there is a technology tool that can be introduced to solve a problem, it's much easier to do that. And you have the buy-in from all the different levels. As always, I've been your host, Thomas Loams. Looking forward to seeing you next time on Sports Tech Feed, the Global Sports Technology Podcast.